Are you guys ready? What's going on, guys? It's Simo, and welcome to the final episode of the top 100 Yu-Gi-Oh cards of all time. From Dark Armed Dragon to Dimension Fusion, all the way to the Dragon Rulers, we have gone all the way across the spectrum of Yu-Gi-Oh's history. We've covered some of the craziest, most insane cards ever created, and we still have 10 more to go. So if you didn't see the last video, I'll have the link on the screen or down in the description. And before we get into it, big shout outs to all of my patrons and my YouTube channel members for their continued support. And if you guys really want to help support the channel, hit the join button down below or check out the links in the description. But without further ado, let's go ahead and bust out the last top 10. Starting, of course, with number 10, we have a card that is so powerful that we don't even actually have it legal yet here in the TCG, but I felt it actually had to make the list because this card actually just warped deck building forever, especially for the OCG players, even though we have yet to experience it here in the TCG. And that card is Crystron Needle Fiber. Now, I know you guys are thinking this might be a little bit, overboard, having a card on this list this high that we have yet to even see here in the TCG. Crystron Needle Fiber is that fucking broken. This card literally changes how the entire game is played. You're gonna want to just have so many random tuner monsters in your deck just to be able to support being able to link summon Crystron Needle Fiber. It's that powerful of a card. This card has so much upside, basically enables so much degenerate bullshit that I had to put it in the top 10. If you literally look at deck lists in the OCG, they're pretty much all playing Crystron Needle Fiber. Ever since this card came out, it has made its presence known because it is incredibly powerful. Not even the fact that you have the ability and the synergy with all the different tuner monsters, being able to do all these different crazy things, but then you also have its tag out ability as well to go into something like Wonder Magician, which then goes into all these other shenanigans. Like, the card is just absurd. Like, I am actually so grateful we do not yet have this card in the TCG at the time of recording this video. I'm honestly okay if we never get it because this card is just so crazy, so powerful. I kind of don't want it to break Yu-Gi-Oh even more than it already is. But that brings us on to number 9. Now for number 9, we have a card that we didn't get here in the TCG way later than when it was initially released in the OCG, but yet pretty much should have never come here in the first place, or it should have just been immediately banned at the time. Sixth Sense. And rather than talking about Sixth Sense myself, I'm going to go ahead and let Lithium 2300 take it from here.
Thank you, Simo. Sixth Sense, one of the best trap cards ever in this game. It was released quite early in the OCG, late September 2003, with 2 other promos, in a small set called the Valuable Book 6. Back then, players were allowed to play 3 copies in their main deck. The early years of Yu-Gi-Oh! Were the Chaos years. As you know, good old Chaos formats were flip effects, and getting the potential +1 over your opponent could be game changing. Now, if you look at Sixth Sense, with 1 dice roll, it could easily give you 5 or 6 extra draws. In most situations you wanted to call 5 or 6, giving you a 1 out of 3 chance to draw the same amount of cards. If not, that's fine, you still get to mill cards and of course maybe fueling your Chaos boss monsters. Early as of 2005, Sixth Sense eventually got banned in the OCG. In 2013, during the memorable Dragon Rulers formats and the TCG finally getting access to Sixth Sense, the card was a huge success in Dragon Rulers, potentially giving you 3 to 4 draws or 5 or 6 cards milled, or tough luck if your opponent rolled a 1 or 2. Sixth Sense immediately was limited to and released, but it didn't take Konami TCG long to eventually ban it also. Okay, thank you, Simo. Now back to you.
Now moving on to number 8, we have definitively, without a doubt, the strongest hand trap ever printed in this game's history, Maxx C. Maxx C just creates the dynamic between 2 players in a game that no other card does. I mean, the fact that your opponent can drop it on you at any moment, basically putting you in this situation where if you want to continue special summoning, you have to give your opponent resources. And with card advantage being so important in Yu-Gi-Oh!, especially more so than in any other card game, every single card you give to your opponent is basically a card that they can probably just win with on the next turn if you don't kill them. This is basically known as the Maxx Max C challenge, where you either win that turn or you're going to lose because your opponent is just going to kill you with a handful of 20 cards. Max C, while it may sound like it's a good concept in theory because it kind of limits and prohibits pretty much all the players from wanting to go off or go all in, it also just creates this environment where the player who has Max C has all of the power, and if the opposing player also doesn't have Max C but you do, then you're probably just going to win because your opponent's going to stop short of having any strong board whatsoever, really. Then you can just stop them with Max C and then go in with your own board, and oh, since they don't have their own Max C, you probably just won, but you didn't really win because of your deck, you won because you had Max C. Now again, this is a very polarizing opinion because Max C is a 3 in the OCG, and people are kind of okay with it there, but there's also plenty of disdain for the card over there as well. I'm on the fence that the card should never be unbanned, even though Yu-Gi-Oh's in the crazy state that it is, because it's not really going to fix anything. It's just kind of going to make people even more upset that they didn't draw Max C when their opponent did. Now for number 7, we probably have the strongest trap card ever printed in this game's history, Royal Oppression. And rather than talk about Royal Oppression myself, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to House of Champs so he can share with you this card's legacy.
What's good, SEMO fans, and welcome to one of the most insane cards in all of history. You guys thought Vanity's Emptiness was bad. Well, you might not have played in an era where this existed. Royal Oppression is basically an emptiness that you turn on, especially being ahead in the game, that just says, nah, we're gonna stop the special summoning throughout this duel. Either player can pay 800 life points to negate the special summon of a monster or monsters, and /or an effect that special summons a monster or monsters, and destroy those cards. You might have heard, actually one of Robbie Cole's namesakes, Oppression gadgets being a thing back in the day. Definitely Royal Oppression just gave power and credence to decks that had slower strategies and would also just shut down the bigger decks. Highly, insanely toxic for the game, and I am glad it remains on the forbidden and limited list today, where it should stay forever. I don't care what errata you want to give this, just make something new and leave this out of the Yu-Gi-Oh! I want to play. Thank you.
Now, moving on to number 6. Oh boy, if you guys thought we were done with Pendulum Monsters, then you are dead wrong, because there is one Pendulum Monster we have still not talked about, and honestly, it's probably the single best Pendulum Monster ever printed in this game's history. Performapal Monkey Board. Man, if you guys think back to the days of Pepe, when Pepe was arguably going to be the next tier 0 deck, I honestly think Pepe is the strongest deck of all time, even though it was very short-lived for us here in the TCG. Monkey Board is pretty much the reason for this deck's power. I mean, you have a single pendulum card that essentially acts as 2 pendulum scales, because as soon as Monkey Board gets activated, oh, guess what? You get to just get another scale for absolutely free. And the fact that the pendulum mechanic is already inherently broken, especially back in Master Rule 3, when you're able to just pendulum summon for 5 for no reason, seems pretty good, right? Yeah. Monkey Board was absurd. I mean, this card, if you just watch duels of the OCG when they played full power Pepe, it's just nuts. Like, Monkey Board, you can just see how powerful this card is. Don't let this cute little face confuse you, because that is the face of sheer terror and disgust, because that's basically what your opponent was feeling every single time Monkey Board got dropped on them. But coming in at number 5, we've got probably one of my favorite cards of all time. This is a card that's solely responsible for the existence of the Forbidden and Limited list, at least in the beginning, and that card is Chaos Emperor Dragon. We're not talking post-errata Chaos Emperor Dragon. We are talking about balls to the wall, fuck you, Chaos Emperor Dragon. This card, like, I have no words. Like, you have a card that at the cost of 1,000 life points, 1,000 life points, and banishing a light and a dark monster, because boy, that's fucking hard, right? You get to destroy all cards on the field and in all players' hands. Oh yeah, and by the way, your opponent also takes damage for each one of those cards that were sent to the graveyard that way. That seems really fair, right? Yeah, and there's no way this card could be even more abused, especially in tandem with stuff like Yata-Garasu, which then can completely lock your opponent from being able to play the game, because then they can't draw anymore. Yeah, the card is nuts. I mean, you also have the fact that it's a 3,000 attack body, so even if you don't use the effect, you get to summon a 3k body on the board for free, and it's just like, it's insane. Like, this is one of the craziest cards ever printed. If you got to play this card or play against this card back when it was first printed, yeah, it's just, you can't, there's no way to describe how powerful this card is. And you know, by today's standards, there's so many cards that float or have protection from destruction that maybe it wouldn't be so bad, but the fact that it also rips people's hands away as well, I had to give it this slot. I mean, it's just incredibly powerful. It's the reason the Forbidden Limited list exists, and that's why it's deserving of that number 5 slot. Now, coming in at number 4, we have a Link Monster, and we have a Link Monster that is still currently legal at the time of recording this video, and it has no right to be legal in the current game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Firewall Dragon. Firewall Dragon had to make it into the top 10 somewhere because I have never seen a single card be essentially the catalyst for so much degenerate bullshit in the entire time that I have played this game. It's not like it's just for one deck. There are like 15, if not 20 different strategies, probably even more than that, that Firewall can be played in to just do so many unfair things that it doesn't even make the game fun anymore. Firewall's ability to basically special summon monsters out from the hand, that isn't once per turn, by the way, is just completely bullshit. And then the fact, too, it's a generic Link 4. It only requires 2 monsters, so it's incredibly generic to make. It's not like it requires effect monsters or cards of a specific type. Like, it's one of the most generic Link monsters ever printed. Oh, and if that weren't enough, guess what? You can also bounce cards from the graveyard back to your hand to recur resources based on the number of cards that it's co-linked with. Yeah, just needed to have that too. So not only are you able to just completely just vomit your hand out onto the field, but if you didn't get enough monsters, you can add some back and vomit out some more. This card should be banned, and then hopefully in the future, if you're watching this, it is, because if you had to play at the time where Firewall Dragon was legal, it is just complete bullshit. It's completely unfair, but well deserving of being the number 4 card of all time. And speaking of vomiting monsters onto the board, we have a generic spell card that's basically been doing that years prior to Firewall Dragon's existence, Soul Charge. Soul Charge is one of, if not the best spell ever printed. I mean, it does cost you 1,000 life points per monster to resurrect, but if you're paying 5,000 life points to go +5 in card advantage, does it really matter? If you're extra linking your opponent, does it really matter? If you're FTKing your opponent, does it really matter? This card used to be at 3, and that was just like basically hell. Like, I don't really know how else to put it, but then it also finally got its way onto the limited list. And even then, now it's just become this Saki power 1-of that if your opponent happens to have it, there's real no way to stop it. I mean, yeah, now we have Ghost Spell, so it's gotten slightly better, but even then, Soul Charge is just incredibly powerful. Like, it's unbelievable how abusable this card is, and it always feels like, you know, when you're in a game with your opponent, you finally, like, feel like you've dwindled them down out of enough resources, you're in a little bit of a grind game, and then they just drop Soul Charge. You just want to throw your arms up because it's like, well, I'm just fucked now. That's how Soul Charge feels. It's just one of the craziest cards ever printed. There's really no other way to put it, and every single deck in the game can play it. It's just that good. Now, coming in at number 2, we have probably one of the oldest, if not one of the most powerful draw spells ever to be printed in this game. It's really old too, but it's Graceful Charity. I mean, a lot of people make the debate between Pot of Greed and Graceful Charity, but in reality, Graceful Charity is way stronger. I mean, you get to draw 3 cards, even though you have to discard 2, but the thing is, when it comes to Graceful Charity, although it's a 3-for-3 in terms of advantage, you're not really netting anything. Discarding 2 of those cards to the graveyard is crazy because there's so much graveyard synergy today that just imagine if that card was legal. Look at your deck right now and think, would I play Graceful Charity in this? Yeah, because there's really no reason not to. Going to cycle through 3 different cards, sending 2 of them to the graveyard for even more setup, especially with stuff like Malicious, and just like there's so much abusable graveyard stuff now that it's just insane. Graceful Charity has just basically the legacy of a lifetime because it's so powerful. Everyone loves it. I mean, it's such a good card. Like, it's just insane. It's insane. There's really like no other way to put it because Graceful Charity is just one of the original power cards that was banned so long ago. I think a lot of people are happy for that because realistically, I don't think people want to get into a top deck war, especially with Graceful Charity in the format. format, but man, this card has quite the legacy, and in my opinion, definitely worthy of that number 2 slot. But oh man, it's time for the moment of truth. What is the number 1 Yu-Gi-Oh card of all time? In my opinion, of course. And if you haven't already figured it out, I went with Painful Choice. Now, Painful Choice, for anyone who did not play back in the day when this card was legal, was just absurd. I mean, you pick 5 cards, your opponent pretty much gives you one of them, and you dump the other 4 into the graveyard. So, we just talked about Graceful Charity and having that graveyard synergy and how well that can be. Well, imagine Graceful Charity, except you get to pick which cards you want to potentially discard out of your deck before you actually have them in your hand. It's crazy because you can just pick all graveyard synergistic cards, your opponent has to give you one of them, and then all the rest are going to go to the graveyard. So then you're just going to be able to set up everything, and then it's going to be game over because you're going to be able to go like +3, +4 off of this card. And again, it's one of those cards that you look at it where you look at your deck and say, would I play Painful Choice? Yeah, you would probably play Painful Choice because there's really no reason not to. These generic spell cards that are this powerful, this just, you know, flexible. I mean, you have so many ways to abuse a card like this that I'm so happy this card is gone. No one ever liked going up against Painful Choice, and yeah, even though there's ways to stop it now compared to the old days, it's just nuts. Painful Choice, in my opinion, is without a doubt the strongest card ever printed in Yu-Gi-Oh! But guys, those are just my thoughts. Let me know down in the comments what you guys think about your top 10 Yu-Gi-Oh cards of all time. I'd really love to hear your thoughts. Guys, thank you so much for watching the video. I really hope you guys enjoyed this series. Be sure to like the video as always, subscribe to the channel for more amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content, and if you really found this series of videos entertaining, consider backing me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube channel member, because just by showing your support in any way that you can, you're investing in my ability to continue bringing you amazing Yu-Gi-Oh content. So thanks so much again, and we'll see you next time.